So Guru Nation, this is a number four. No one's keeping track anymore, so who cares? But for those keeping score at home, it is number four of a 10-part series of site networks and golden era of research sites. So the last one I did was diversity, and the one before that was about consolidation and what sponsors want. So those were the three I've done, and then this fourth one is really, and this smashes through a lot of things I talk about, and this is not just my thoughts. First of all, this is from quote unquote the smart money. If you are listening to the podcast, I'm doing air quotes, but like I do agree with most of this, and where I don't, I'm gonna give you my opinion. But the era of standalone sites are dying. So let me just preface this whole thing with, right now it's 2025. For those of you watching in the future, I predict, and many others share in my prediction, that we are in the golden era of research sites. We just came out of the golden era of CROs. And if you actually look a little bit further, we are in the golden era of small biotechs as well. What is pushing this trend forward is a lot of things. There's money, private equity knows, but I think private equity and hedge funds and things like that are a byproduct of the underlying trend, which is technology, particularly AI. And on top of it, and this is the variable that I think looks scary at first to those of us in the industry, but is actually going to be a tailwind. And I think it's the new administration and their push for speed and efficiency. And the ones best served to do that are not large bureaucratic entities, whether on the site side in the form of academic medical centers. We've seen what's happening with the NIH, National Institute of Health, nor on the sponsor side with the big pharma. It's at the small end of the spectrum for both of those stakeholders. It's the small research clinics and it's the small biotechs. And so I think everyone should watch the 1 hour Megyn Kelly interview with the new chief of the FDA, Markey, I think is his name. But he discusses exactly what they plan on doing. And AI is a big part of it. They already are eliminating animal studies from a lot of the monoclonal antibodies. They're already going to be pushing for more of the small molecule versus the large molecule. So I do think there's going to be an era of the golden era for small. And I've been saying it. I think I was early because I was saying this right around COVID. Small is the new big. And I think we're actually living in that right now in 2025. And I do think it lasts for about a decade. I think we've got a good decade here to figure this out. And by the time 2035 hits, hello to those of you watching in the future, if it is 2035, I do think we'll be entering a new paradigm of some sorts. And I do think AI is going to have a lot to do with it. But maybe even digital twin studies, in silico studies, which you already heard the FDA head is already talking about this stuff. So I do think that's coming, but that's too far away from now. What is happening now, standalone sites are dying. And here's what comes next. And my own site, I own a standalone site. It is a small community-based research clinic. We are embedded with certain private practices throughout the area, and we are growing as far as our specialists are concerned. We just added a GI specialist to join us. We added a nephrologist late last year. We have yet to get studies for those two. Prior to that, we got a cardiologist, a respiratory, a pulmonologist, a sleep specialist, a dermatologist, a neurologist, a psychiatrist, and an internal medicine. So we've been able to get studies for all of those. The last two, which we just got recently, we will eventually get studies for. But in many ways, we are still considered small, and we are still considered standalone because we operate under what's called the hub and spoke model, where we have our main location, and then we have the different clinics throughout town where the providers the PIs, actually work and treat and see their patients outside of research, but they are the patient recruitment funnel to our research site. So, what do I mean, and what does the industry mean, the quote-unquote smart money, when they say standalone sites are dying? Here's what comes next. The standalone model isn't failing because it's bad. It's failing because it can't keep up. Complexity, labor shortages, tech overload, this industry is breaking the lone wolf site. And I know a bunch of sites my size, some are slightly smaller, some slightly bigger. We're all still considered smaller sites. Independent sites, we're not part of a site network yet. From those groups, there are two camps. There are those that will adopt new technologies, and there are those that won't and are holding on to their sacred cows. The sacred cows being paper source. The sacred cows being, we've always done things this way. We're not going to change. The industry is demanding that change, and they're allowing, they being the sponsors, are allowing the sites to bring their own tech, right? It's called BYOT. At SOS, we interviewed Joe Dustin. We talked about this very thing. The sponsors are allowing sites to do it. It's voluntary. It's not tyrannical. It's not mandated from the top down. It's voluntary. Because of that freedom, some sites are going to evolve and change with the times, and others, because it's their right to do so, it's free industry, they won't. I believe those will be left out, or they will get acquired. They will be forced to join a site network at some point, and it will be at a low valuation compared to what they could get otherwise. So this is not a call to action. You run your site how you want. Believe me, I was one person 5 years ago, maybe a little longer, that was not really interested in changing how we do things. I thought the way sites do things is essentially like fundamental, and if you distill it to its four principles: recruiting patients, recruiting studies, getting contracts and budgets, and keeping your operations in check. I think those things back then were difficult to see how technology can help any of those four areas. Fast forward 5 years later, technology is disrupting, not just helping, radically disrupting every single one of those four verticals. So this fourth video in this series is why standalone sites matter. They still do, by the way. Because of the last video I did on diversity, and because of the move away, it looks like industry-wide, away from academic medical centers as much because of the NIH cuts and the inefficiency that those centers tend to have. Whether you agree with it or not, it's happening, and that business is trickling into the private industry. Now, the private industry is going through crazy consolidation. I said in my first video, I believe, on this series, only 10% of sites are part of a site network. I predict by 2035, that number is closer to, I still think it's less than 50, but it wouldn't surprise me if it's over 50, but I think it's going to be somewhere around 40%, 35 to 40% of sites are part of a site network. So to get, and that's a short period of time, that's 10 years, to get from 10% of sites being a part of a site network to 35, right? That's a doubling, that's a tripling of what you're currently seeing now. So you're going to see triple the consolidation, and you're going to see crazy tech stack integrations when it comes to managing all those aspects I just mentioned: business development, patient recruitment, contracts and budgets, and site operations. So that's what's going to usher in this golden era, because there are still every day brand new, Chris and I deal with it in our consulting firm, brand new sites. Hey, I have a private practice. I want to start doing research. You're going to still have those mom and pop springing up all over the place. From those, many will eventually mature and join a site network, and many more won't, and then many will also fail after a few years. That's just the reality of any business, really. So that's not going to change, but what is going to change is the complexity. The complexity is getting more complex. And what prevents, the number one thing that prevents growth and growing to a new level of business success, productivity, profitability is the ceiling of complexity. So if you want to achieve better results, you got to figure out a way to get the complexity tamed. Complexity in many ways is chaos, and your job is to bring order to that chaos. So if you want to smash through that ceiling, you're going to have to figure it out. And a lot of the tools at your disposal are coming up now. AI is one of them, but things like Creo, shout out to Creo, they're a sponsor. Inato, I mean, that's a free one. There's a lot of others. I've been interviewing tons of them lately. And at SOS, you saw a whole bunch of them. AI is starting to get more involved. It's taking out the mundane work from the staff, but only for the sites that voluntarily choose to start experimenting with this stuff. For the other sites, they're either going to have to figure out how to get through that complexity on their own, which is a lot harder, or they'll have to join a site network, and the site networks have figured this out or are figuring this part out, how to centralize things. So 90% of clinical trial sites in the US are still standalone sites. This helps. No one can recruit patients at the local level better than a local site can. No one knows their community better than a local site does. But the landscape is shifting and the model is cracking under the pressure, because I encourage everyone, again, watch that hour-long Megyn Kelly interview with the new FDA head, Markey. Read his book if you want. I have yet to read it. I'll do a full book review when I'm done. I have it in my queue. The models are getting more complex, not less. So for those sites complaining, these studies are getting more and more complex, it's going to just get worse. And you need these tools to help you out, and you need to figure out how to solve that complexity. So that's leading to investigator attrition and burnout. 2 out of 3 investigators, as of last year, as of a survey last year, 2 out of 3 investigators only do one trial and never do a second. Why is that? Most never return. No skill compounding, no SOP development. They don't get rewarded with more trials. So low trial volume equals low revenue, higher regulatory burden, administrative overload, more complex studies, poor training on the sponsored tech, poor training on or not using any tech at the site level leads to frustration. First timers without infrastructure. When the trial ends, so does their research career. This is unfortunate. The only solution is, I hope my podcast is one, but I'm realistic. Like, if I can help a few people out there, that's fine. I'm glad to hear we already have been, but it's not enough to make a real dent in the industry. What's going to make a dent in the industry is figuring out how to scale this grassroots efforts of getting PIs interested, of getting ways to scale, how to figure out how to get your first trial, how to recruit, how to negotiate a good budget on it, how to recruit patients, and then how to not screw up your study. If you use Charlie Munger's inversion method, it's a very simple way to solve a problem. It's a mental model. The inversion method says, when you get a study, the traditional question most people want to ask is, how can I maximize my potential? But what you really should be asking, it's under the inversion model, is how can I screw up this study and never do another study again? And if more first-time investigators looked at it through that lens of Charlie Munger's inversion model, I think you would have better prepared investigators when they start doing studies. So labor shortages also, it's another thing. There's a whole panel on SOS on this. The reported turnover among patient-facing staff, so that's study coordinators, research assistants, has doubled since pre-COVID from about 15% to close to 35. It's actually, there's a range of percentages. It's from 10 to 40 pre-COVID to 35 to 60. So the turnover has doubled since before COVID to today. Now, that is because of increased competition. So in a lot of cities, there are multiple places where coordinators can go work. Prior to the CRO not hiring, so CROs are, and this is kind of like an underlying theme of this whole 10-part series, the CROs are struggling to maintain market share because of the site networks, which we got into in the second part of this video, what sponsors really want but are not telling you. The CROs used to be a competitor. Also, another competitor to small independent clinics were academic medical centers. They used to hire coordinators that used to work at standalone sites. I myself have lost many staff to academic medical centers and to CROs throughout my 20-year career of doing this. So labor shortages are nothing new to me, but you learn how to adapt your culture to where it's a voluntary approach towards growing not only the company and the company's objectives, but the individual's objectives within the company. And that's something I've learned the hard way. I plan on writing another book soon, half philosophy, half memoir about, and it's going to include anecdotes about employee retention and things like that. But 85% of site staff losses go to pharma and CROs offering better pay and work. It used to be the academic medical centers as well. Replacing a coordinator costs the site 6 months of salary. It does take about 6 months to get a new staff member with zero research experience, if they have potential, up and running as a fully functional coordinator. In my experience, it is about 6 months. You can do it in 3 months for certain aspects of the job, but it's really 6 months for the fully fledged, like fully functional coordinator. It doesn't mean they're not going to make mistakes and still have a learning curve ahead of them. It just means you could basically leave them to do a screening and a randomization visit, which are the hardest visits in research at the site level, on their own, more or less. So sites are hiring inexperienced staff, takes longer training, leads to more deviations. There are tools now that are coming out, especially AI, that are helping with this stuff. And we're in the early days of this. Now, complexity is increasing. Complexity has increased across every therapeutic area. This is per a Nature study in 2024. Phase 2 and 3 complexity is up 15%. Phase 1 is up 40%. So this includes biomarker-driven inclusion criteria, adaptive designs, basket trials, global site coordination, cold chain, direct-to-patient logistics. Sites with one coordinator, which are a lot of these standalone sites, first-time PIs, they're jumping into a extremely complex product. It's never been this complex ever in the history of clinical research, and it's only going to increase because technology allows sponsors to experiment more. And a lot of these things are ultimately better in the long run for the pharma, but in the short term, there's a lot of pain, and that pain comes in the form of frustration at the site level. So this complexity, again, you want to get to the next level of your business, you got to figure out how to solve this complexity. And that's at the ceiling of every level that you want to jump your business to. You're going to be met by complexity and increasing complexity. I see it myself with my own studies here. It used to not be that common to need a third-party vendor to do much. Now, almost every study requires some third-party member, whether it's a local lab or an imaging center or a radiology center or an infusion center or an ophthalmologist, or there's just all kinds of extra things we need. These are exploratory endpoints, and I've done hour-long podcasts on this with people like Robert Goldman, affectionately known as the sponsor monster, but protocols are getting more complex. Now, tech overload is real. 60% of sites use 20 or more different software platforms across their studies. Each have their own training module, each have their own logins, each have audit and compliance workflow. Sites often use Excel to store passwords, which is non-compliant and insecure. Versatile, who I used to be an advisor for, and then they got acquired, solved some of this problem. It was just a simple bookmark tool, but now you're able to just have everything kind of neat in one place, and it was kind of a reflection of this tech overload, and I think it's still a problem. Matter of fact, it's getting worse. The tech is designed for the sponsors, really, not optimized for site workflows, and the majority of the complexity is going to be figuring out all these tech portals as well as the protocol itself being more complex. Failed enrollment. So the inclusion-exclusion criteria is getting harder. 41% of trials fail to meet enrollment goals. 30% of sites enroll 0 patients on a study. And 53% of sites lack bandwidth to take on new studies. And that's up 14% pre-COVID. Now, my own site, we've been fortunate enough to be in a community where we don't have competition, and we are starting to see the effects of this. And we're going to need to onboard new staff. We're going to need to do everything I'm talking about in this video. And I think tech is a tool for me to use. We're already using a lot. We just signed up with Monday.com to manage project management workflow at a meta level for the studies. But then each study itself has its own workflows. So we have to figure these things out, because at the end of the day, what matters is that you're enrolling patients and that you're retaining them. Now, networked infrastructure is the solution, and this is where site networks have started to come into effect. And we've started seeing this really, the early ones pre-COVID, right before COVID. COVID accelerated it. Diversity inclusion mandates from the FDA threw rocket fuel on it. And that's where we are today. And now I think the new administration is going to accelerate it even further because of everything I discussed already in this podcast. So site networks bring shared SOPs. They bring their own dedicated recruitment teams and infrastructure. They bring standardized tech, so their own CTMS, their own eReg, their own eSource, their own quality assurance, negotiating leverage with CROs and sponsors. The networks reduce study startup time, increase enrollment, and retain trained staff. Networks are absorbing the pain that would otherwise kill standalone sites and otherwise kill sponsors' study. Now, listen to what I just said. Let me go back. Shared SOPs, dedicated recruitment teams, standardized tech, quality assurance, negotiating leverage with CRO sponsors, reduce studies startup time, increase enrollment, retain trained staff, absorb the pain. That means doing feasibilities. That means selecting sites. That means possibly lending a QA, aka monitoring service, to the sponsors. That is literally what CROs offered. That was a lot of their value prop over the past few decades. Those two stakeholders are going to be fighting for the same work, and we know who's going to win. And it's no secret why the CROs have been buying sites as well. I talked about that in the second video of this series. So again, only 10% of sites are part of a site network. That number, in my opinion, could get as high as 50% in a decade. I think it's going to be around 35 to 40, just because even if that rate of sites joining networks more than triples, you're going to have a faster rate of new sites popping up. So to keep up with that, I think it's going to need to be even more so than tripling to get to 50 or 40. Now, what's next? Here's some options for standalones. I've kind of interjected my thoughts here. It's not just my thoughts. I'm an active participant in this space. I'm not just an observer. I am a player in the system. Option A, stay independent. That's where we are right now. We don't have to be niche. We do multi-therapeutics. It's just how quickly we can grow with new specialists we bring on. I think you have to invest in a tech stack by now. Staff training, compliance. Sponsors are demanding more now. And it's the floor of what was acceptable in the past is no longer acceptable today. And that's what progress and innovation is supposed to do. It's supposed to raise the standards for everyone. And the outcomes are usually good, but the process itself is painful. And so this is what a lot of independent sites are dealing with. High risk, high workload, low support. Option B is join a network. So you access the shared infrastructure plus sponsor volume, so you don't need to worry about biz dev anymore. Lower admin burden. You don't need to worry about doing feasibility surveys. You don't need to worry about negotiating contracts and budgets, training. You trade some autonomy for sustainability. That does come at a cost, especially as the demand for the supply of sites joining site networks is going to triple. And option C is kind of what we're planning to do at Yuma Clinical Trials, is building a network. So if you're already doing multi-site management like we are, lean in on that model. Offer back office services to other standalones in areas that you want to expand. Get some financing. There's plenty of investors now in this space, or do it bootstrap. Brad Hightower is doing it this way too. From Oklahoma, he's now moving into Arkansas, and I believe he's I heard Las Vegas. So he's kind of doing this. Turn your brand into foundation for a regional or national platform. So, Brad, myself, we have the added advantage of having a brand outside of our sites. But I know a lot of sites that are standalone sites that have built reputable brands for their own site. So you can now piggyback that as your leverage for when you find other standalone sites in areas that you want to expand to, and work out a deal, build a model where everybody wins. You're going to have to improve and change kind of your core competency, but we're in the golden era of research sites. I mean, you can't do the same thing that you did 10 years ago. You can, but you're going to be left behind because there's a lot more to be had by taking advantage of the situation. So again, closing remarks. Okay, standalone sites aren't dying because they're bad. They're dying because they're isolated and they're not responding to the complexity. The system is too complex and getting more so. It's fast moving, getting more so. Too tech heavy and getting more so. But if you're willing to standardize, collaborate, and evolve, you can do it. If you're feeling this pressure and you're a standalone site, we need to talk. You can talk to others through things like Save Our Sites. We can help you with patient recruitment, Patient Ace. Me and Chris's consulting service is kind of a unofficial site network of sorts. We have 85 sites in our network that we help get them studies, negotiate budgets for, kind of give best practices for SOPs. Every site's still independently owned, so we don't share the SOPs, but we share the best practices. We make vendor recommendations like Creo, like Inato, soon to be maybe like Monday.com for the sites that are growing and trying to get through that ceiling of complexity. So give me a call. We help sites all the time, whether you're established or you're brand new thinking about starting a site. This is the golden era of research. I think we've got a decade to do really well here. And the question really is, what are you going to do about it? Thank you so much for watching and listening. Make sure you like, subscribe, comment, share, and we'll catch you later. Bye-bye. Hey, if you guys like that kind of content, make sure you like, subscribe, comment, share. Stay tuned for more videos.